Hey, I'm Micha Jade, a female empowerment and mindset coach and the host of Fish Out of Water podcast. I'm passionate about all things health, happiness and well-being, so I've created this podcast to shine a light on the best insights that I found to help you on your self-healing journey. Each week, we'll be joined by my favourite coaches, healers and influencers to uncover a holistic view of all things health and happiness. I'm so glad you're joining us here today, so let's get into it. Okay, so do you want to kick off by just introducing yourself, who you are, what you do?
So my name is Dawn Ford and I'm a grief recovery specialist. I'm also a loss and wellbeing specialist, but most of my work is actually the grief recovery method. And the grief recovery method isn't counselling and it isn't therapy. It's actually educational. And I think that's where most people get confused.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to delve into that a little bit more, like what the differences are and how? Yeah, of
course. So with the grief recovery method, as I say, the core is in education. So in a way, we sort of going backwards. When you do the program, you actually relearn or undo what you've learned, particularly around the myths around grief, which actually are huge in our society. Huge.
Yeah, which I think we're going to uncover some of today, and that's actually the work that I do as well with my coaching. Is a lot of it stems on education, and it's really interesting the results you get from it. And I know you get fantastic results, so that'll be really interesting to delve into. So let's start off by defining what loss and grief actually is, because like you say, I think this is a big myth in society.
Yeah. So initially, if you say the word loss or you say the word grief, most people straight away go to bereavement. They go to a death. But actually, in our lifetime, we can actually grieve up to 40 different life loss experiences. So the one that comes to mind that most people may think is a loss is divorce. And the fallout of divorce, of course, is absolutely huge. One of the things to say as well about divorce is that once you actually have the divorce, financially the relationship can be over, and physically the relationship can be over, but actually emotionally it's not anywhere near over. And so most of my clients, strangely enough, they don't come because of grief as in bereavement. They actually come to me because they're still struggling with a relationship breakup or a divorce.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because like you say, most people probably think it is a death. And I know when we spoke about it on the phone, so divorce is another one, breakup's another one. And we also spoke about some of the other things that could be cast as a loss that people go through, things like losing friends or losing normality of life or health or like at the moment what we're all experiencing, we've lost our luxuries, I guess, and now become luxuries. What used to be normal, just going out for a coffee, going to the gym.
The freedom. We've lost. You see, when loss could be defined, I suppose, as when something is no more. So generally, we think of a loss as we just said now with the pandemic. So our norm has changed for the foreseeable future. Hopefully we will go back, but if we don't, it's going to be a new norm.
Yeah.
So because we grieve any loss, and as we've just said, it is the loss of death, which has been absolutely devastatingly high. I think I heard on the radio yesterday it's exceeded 100,000 in the UK. So, and every one of those deaths, of course, is a grandparent, is a parent, a brother, sister, cousin, niece, friend, and so on. I mean, it's you just can't comprehend it, can you? It's enormous.
No, it's too big of figures to get your head around.
It's just staggering. But if we put that to the side just for a second, and not for any moment sort of making it any less important because it's enormous. But the other losses that we are experiencing, like you said, loss of the norm, going to the gym. Loss of socializing. I mean, my husband and I, we're known in Hereford for the odd coffee. We often sit at a coffee shop, and that's the only thing. He's retired. Excuse me. So that's the one thing that he does, and he goes to the gym. So those two things have gone. They've gone. Now, to a lot of people, you've got loss of job, you've got loss of income, you've got loss of school, so you're homeschooling and your friendships there. And most people who wouldn't have thought of that as a loss before, maybe just sort of being typically British, let's get on with it. But actually, I think it's great to be positive, and it's great to have that mindset where we can try to embrace change. But at the same time, it's more than okay to say, this is really hard, this is really challenging, and you know what, today's a really tough day and I'm not coping. And I think that's what I want to get the message out when it comes to different types of losses, that actually there's so much more we're struggling with other than a bereavement.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's not just about recognizing what is a loss, because I think it is very British, and I get this a lot with clients, is we minimize our stuff. Well, so and so's lost their parents, so this is how can I moan, how can I complain about this? And it just doesn't help us with the human experience, because whatever emotion we're feeling it, whether we want to deny it, suppress it, minimize it, whatever, the emotion is there. And I know a lot of the work you do is around actually feeling those emotions. I can't remember what you said, a really great word when we had a chat last week. What was it, like leaning into the emotion or something about that?
Oh, I just want to recap on what you've said, which is fantastic what you just said. So we do minimize, we do minimize, and I think we're a culture of that, because we put bereavement, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, at the top. All the other losses we have, a lot of people around us play it down. But if I give you an example, by the way, we never compare. With the grief recovery, we always say everybody's unique, every experience is unique, and every loss experience is actually felt at 100% intensity to that person. 100%.
Yeah.
So we should never minimize, but we do. We're in the society that does that. So if you take, for example, you're at a dinner party, and there's a lady on the table whose husband's just died. And she is sat on the table with another lady whose husband has just betrayed her, had an affair, and is divorcing her. Now, one may think that the person whose husband has died is going to warrant the sympathy. And I get that, because obviously bereavement is the biggest loss, as in you're never going to see them again, and it's an end of the relationship totally. But from an intensity point of view, if the person who had been married to her husband and he dies wasn't a very long relationship, or wasn't particularly loving, or he'd been very ill, and we get what we call complex grief. Excuse me. So complex grief is when somebody has suffered with an illness for a long time, and you're relieved that they're no longer struggling. Oh my God, you're so sad that you're not going to see them again as well. So we don't know what the circumstances are with that lady's husband's death and her relationship. The other lady who's crying and is beside herself because her husband's cheated and she's going through a divorce, she may never wanted a divorce. It may have been a complete shock, almost like a sudden death. So who's to say that she can't speak and have sympathy too? Because she can. It warrants it, because she is grieving at 100%.
And there's different pains added to that, isn't there? There's the pain of betrayal. There's the pain of your trust in people being shaken a little bit. The pain of seeing that person still there, choosing to hurt you. So there's, like you say, it's I actually did a post about this the other day, about how we can't compare our journeys. And the thing that we can really empathize with is the emotion, because we've all experienced the emotion, whether we've not experienced the exact situation that triggered that emotion. We know sadness, we know anger, we know pain. And empathizing from those kind of points is so key. I know one of the key things in your program, and I think it's a really big thing that I've definitely kind of had a shift around, is about feeling those emotions. I think before I was kind of part of the positive mental attitude movement, and I think that's so unhelpful, isn't it? Shove a load of positivity on top, and this sort of like had good vibes only. It's like, well, no, actually sometimes it's okay to feel everything.
Oh, Misha, spot on. Excuse me. So, where do I start? Okay, one of the things to say is that feeling is feeling. So sadness just is. Happiness just is. Feeling just is. So all of these feelings that we experience, every one of those is normal and natural. We do not wake up in the morning and try to tell our brain, to tell our heart to feel sad. We just feel sad. And we can't undo it. But what we try to do is we block it, we deny it, or we bury it. And over time, what happens is that if we have a lot of experiences, maybe with one person, maybe with many, if you imagine that first time somebody says something that's really hurtful, or it's a betrayal, and if you can imagine that layer, that experience being right at the bottom of your stomach, and every time that person says something that's insulting, or really hurtful, or makes you feel ashamed, bit by bit, that comment, that action builds up to the point where we can't speak, we can't breathe, we can't keep our head above water because we're choked. And that's what happens over time, because we haven't got rid of it, we haven't leaned into it, we haven't done, which is what I tell people to do. So that we think we're burying it, we think we're denying it, but my God, it knows, and it's still there. And I'm sure you've heard the term that the body keeps the score, and it does. It doesn't go away. I can remember things that, say, my husband might have said 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And he might have said, I don't know, 30 wonderful things, but that one thing hurt. I can't remember the other 30. I can only
and they might not
one.
even remember they've said it, but it's just, but like you say, you store it, or it's hit a nerve, it's hit something that you believe about yourself, and it's, you know, and it's really cut deep.
Yes, that's because it's hit a trigger.
Yeah.
And you're right, and that trigger comes from before, and it comes from 9 times out of 10 from childhood.
Yeah.
There is something that is said, sometimes in the family, sometimes in the classroom, that sticks. And then, as you know, you then have this belief system built around that. And I know that when I saw you do your talk, you know, a couple of years ago, it's about breaking that down. And this leads me nicely onto what you said before about these feelings. I did a post a while ago about gratitude. And I know that Alice, my daughter, is a huge believer in this as well. There is a trend that gratitude is the highest, and we need to be at this peak. We need to resonate with only the good. And yes, I think gratitude is fantastic, and I think positive mindfulness is fantastic. But if we mask everything that's actually underneath that, I think that gratitude and mindfulness to this point can be dangerous. So I'm not saying that we have to go around not being able to find gratitude in things. But if I give you an example, on my program, we do something called the loss history graph. And the program I run is 8 sessions long. And I think the loss history graph is around session 4, session 5. Now, on that loss history graph, I get my client to identify and share certain experiences in their life that have left them feeling sad or traumatized, maybe betrayed, unhappy, disappointed. Now, I had written on mine, when I did my training, I'm in my 5th year now, so back in 2016, when I did my training, I wrote down 2 life experiences. One was involving my daughter Alice, and one was involving our wedding day. Now, I had put those life experiences at about a 4 or 5 out of 10. And then when I was thinking about, feeling sort of grateful, I revisited my graph last year, and I realized that my feelings over those extremely traumatic experiences, because we had a road accident, I need to explain that. I
know the story actually, but yeah, maybe for anyone listening, they might be like, okay, she married the wrong guy.
Yes, exactly. No, but so we had this road accident, and I was left without the memory of the day. I developed agoraphobia. I lost my job. I became really ill. And it really affected me, and I still don't have the memory 32 years later. So there was a knock-on effect from that accident on that day. But so going back to this gratitude, you see, when I had the road accident, I remember feeling grateful because nobody had died. And I was extremely grateful because it was a road accident, on a main road. We had ambulances and stuff, and police, and it was, really traumatic for those that were there and witnessed it. But so I was grateful. And I was, but I had denied the extreme sadness that I felt and the anguish that followed and was around that with the people around me, because I picked up on that, even though I couldn't remember it, because I went into shock, quite badly. So when I revisited it last year, I thought, my God, it's a 10. It's a 10, it's not a 4. Every time, I have an anniversary, or I did have, it's not so bad now, I would feel so sad that I was robbed of that beautiful day. I was so sad that I referred to our wedding day as the accident for 10 years or more. I didn't say our wedding day. I said we had the accident. What about the accident? It was just all consuming. Yeah. So, and then also with Alice, she had an accident, and I was so grateful at the time, and still am grateful that it wasn't worse. But at the same time, I didn't allow myself to grieve what had happened. So I realized from a personal point of view that I have gratitude, but I have gratitude now because I have lent into those feelings. And Alice does a lot of Reiki and does some superb work on healing. And she'd asked me if I wanted a Reiki session. And so I said, yes, please, because they're always amazing. And I lay on her couch, and honestly, I did not feel sad before I got on that couch. I had no idea what was going to happen. And then, she does her magic. And I couldn't stop sobbing. I could not stop sobbing. And I realized I was going back to that experience when she was 3 and to the wedding day back in 88. And I realized, and I was holding my stomach and absolutely sobbing. But once I finished, and I think she was really shocked and quite concerned, and then I told her, and she said, oh, but that's amazing, because I had held on to, for all those years, at least 32 years, that sadness, extreme sadness, that disappointment, that anxiety. And as a consequence of both of those, I developed illnesses anyway, later on. And that's why I know firsthand that the body keeps the score.
There's some really interesting things that I just want to pick up on that. And it's at the moment, and you see it everywhere, make sure you do a gratitude journal every day, write the things you're grateful for. And I'm really big on gratitude as well. I think you can't really feel gratitude and sadness at the same time. I think gratitude is the most beautiful emotion, isn't it? And you can be grateful for even the most tricky times in your life when you can lean into that. But like you say, you've got to feel it first, because when we're doing it as a morning journaling exercise, it can become a tick box exercise of writing the things I should be grateful for. And the word should is just such a bad word. And there comes like blame and shame and judgment on top of that, as opposed to, I remember once when I first got injured, I injured my knee and I was on crutches for about 9 months of 1 year. And someone said to me, well, at least you're not in a wheelchair. And I was like, okay, yeah, that is very true. At least I'm not in a wheelchair. But at the same time, I used to dance 5 nights a week. I used to be able to run. I used to love running. Like all these things, all these sports that brought me so much joy weren't there. And then you've got the judgment of, well, you should be grateful that you didn't do this. And it's like, well, I would have just been grateful if I didn't do any of it.
Damaging. It's just so damaging.
It is. And it's just recognizing that sometimes the gratitude list isn't helpful unless you're actually feeling the emotion of gratitude.
And
some days it's going to be, exactly. And some days it's going to be different. Like some days I can sit there this morning, I drank my morning coffee and I just absolutely reveled in it. And other days you can't be grateful for that because you've got other stuff going on. It's just different.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I really wanted to pick up on what you're saying is that processing of emotions, because we both spoke about, so there's experiences when you don't process it, that emotion actually traumatizes you for quite a long time. It's held in the body, it comes out in different ways. But we both spoke last week about when we had processed an emotion.
Yeah.
So for me, it was an example. We put my dog down a few months ago,
yeah.
and I allowed myself to feel the whole sadness of the day.
Yes.
And I've not felt sad since.
No.
I processed it that day, and I'm completely over it.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, go. I was just going to say, can you delve into that and what it's like, the difference between processing and minimizing, and how that comes out?
Oh gosh, there's so much you're saying that I need to be writing notes, and I'm not. If we just go back to initially the thing that you said about the wheelchair, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You know, and the crutches, and somebody had said to you, you know, at least you're not in a wheelchair. This is what people do. We talked about it right at the beginning about this minimalizing. Okay, so what we say as grief recovery specialists is, you know, that's an intellectual comment or an intellectual truth. Mm-hmm. But it is not emotionally beneficial to you at all. Because as you said, you were so sad you couldn't dance, you know, you couldn't run. And somebody saying to you, well, at least you're not in a wheelchair, that didn't make you feel grateful, or it made you feel hurt, or not listened to, or misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And I think that when people do this, my own take on it, and I don't think it's right, but I think it's what we do as a society. I think when somebody says something like that to you, and they're trying to make you feel better, even though it doesn't seem like it, it's like an external hug. Sort of like, you know, when somebody also says to you, oh, yeah, me and my boyfriend split up too, I know exactly how you feel. Mm-hmm. And again, that could be true to the point that they had a similar experience, but they don't know exactly how you feel. They can't, because you're an individual and you're unique. And the relationship you had with your ex-boyfriend was unique to you too. So when they say these things, I know exactly how you feel. I think it's nearly always with well-meaning, mm-hmm. but I think it's to do with somebody extending this sort of invisible hug to say, you know, you're in our group, you're in our gang. Mm-hmm. But again, it is not emotionally beneficial on any level.
And I think it comes down to that, the root of it is our uncomfortableness with seeing somebody else sad, hurt, angry, lost, confused, or whatever, you know, whatever emotion it is, because we are this PMA. We only accept half the emotions. I always say to my friend, you wouldn't hold in a sneeze, so why would you hold in a cry?
Absolutely.
Imagine if we went round apologising. Oh, I'm so sorry I sneezed. I'm so sorry I did that. But we do when we cry.
Well, I was going to say, we do. Oh my goodness. Where do I start? Okay, first of all,
we got too many tabs open.
Too many things. Okay, first of all, on the back of my business card, it says, no one likes to feel sad, so they do what most people are taught. They pretend they're okay. Mm. So that is true. Most of us feel, if not everybody, uncomfortable around sadness. Mm. And let's be honest, apart from people like ourselves, in the main, people don't like to be sad themselves. So therefore, the people around them, whether it's family or partners or colleagues or friends, they feel uncomfortable too. Mm-hmm. So this is an enormous issue that we have had for so long in our society that we need to sort out, because I believe that it is at the core of the mental health issues we have. Mm-hmm. Now, you said a wonderful thing. You wouldn't keep a sneezing. Why keep a crying? So when I see clients for the first session or second session, I normally say to them, imagine a baby lying on the mat, on a changing mat, on a rug. That baby is laughing and it's chuckling and it's really happy and it's smiling. And as a parent or a carer, you're so grateful because you know that they've been fed. You know that they've been changed and they're clean. You know that they don't have trapped wind or in pain. You know they feel safe. Mm-hmm. So we need this visual noise and, audio as well, if you like, so we need to hear this and see this. Okay, so that baby in seconds can then start to cry. Mm-hmm. And we need to hear the cry. We need to see the tears and the face sort of, screwing up, because then that sends us alarm signals. What's wrong? Why is our baby crying? Mm-hmm. And again, it could be because, it is hungry, it is in pain, it doesn't feel safe, it's frightened. So why is it that from about the age of 4, we say to our children, stop crying. Mm-hmm. If you're going to cry, go to your room. You know, you're a big girl now. Big girls don't cry. For goodness sake, you know, get out of the room, go to your bedroom, you know. So all these things that we say, we undo the encouragement we have from when they're a young baby. Because if that little girl, your daughter or your little girl comes up to you and she says, you know, mummy or teacher, you know, I've got a tummy ache. You think, thank God for that. Okay, so I can take you to the doctors. You know, I feel scared. I can sit with you. So we're so grateful, if you like, we're so appreciative that when they're young, they do tell us how they feel. And thank God for it. I want to go to the toilet. I'm in pain. I can't go to the toilet. There's, you know, I'm scared because of somebody at school I don't like, or I'm scared because it's a different classroom. And if you can tell your parent or a teacher, you know, hopefully the parent or the teacher can actually say, you know, please don't worry. What are you worried about? Let's look into it. Let's talk about it. So why, from the age of 4 or 5, do we say, I don't want to know? Don't come to me. Don't come to me.
That's so sad, isn't it? Go to your room. It's so sad. Oh, bless. You just want to give everyone's little inner child a hug.
You do. And I think, and this is where I get really quite upset. And also, you know, I'm not really an angry person, but I can be when it comes to this, is the way that we are actually damaging our children. I mean, this has now gone into mental health a bit in children, but anyway, it's organic.
We're on a roll, and I think this is helpful across any dealing with anything mental health.
No, it is.
We need to normalize all emotions.
We do, absolutely. We need to embrace them as well, not just normalize. I think we need to embrace them. So going back to the children, I can remember somebody saying to me, and I don't know whether it was at school, but I think I'd fallen over and I'd hurt my knee, and I think it was one of the teachers, and they said, you know, come and have a sweet or a biscuit or something. And so you do, and maybe for that second or that minute you think, oh, this is better, this is nice, but actually what we're doing is setting up a lifetime of association between food and feeling sad. So, or
gifts, or buying anything, but
we haven't even
rather than actually
those,
feeling the sad.
Because what I would suggest is for every teacher or parent or friend or whatever is to say, I'm really sad that you're sad. Do you want to talk about it? Can I sit with you? What's happened? Would you like to talk? Instead, oh, what you need is a night out with the girls. Oh, what you need is a holiday. I'll pay. You know, if you're an adult, and if you're a child, it's like, you know, come on, let's go and feed the ducks. You know, let's go and see Granny. Or you know, so
I need this bottle of wine, this packet of bags, whatever the thing is.
Yes, and
I need anything but to feel the emotion that's natural.
Anything. And in the grief recovery, we talk about those as stirbs. So this is probably on session 2, and stirbs means short-term energy relieving behaviors. So what we know, we don't just believe this, but we know that any of these distractions or stirbs, they're what we go to short-term, or hopefully short-term, when there's a sadness or there's a painful experience. So as you said, you reach for the wine or retail therapy, which is so ironic, you know, because it's completely not, it's not really therapy at all.
Therapy,
No, it's not therapy. And you know, you can feel different when you're at the till or now online and it's in your cart and you're buying it. You can feel different when you exercise and you go for that run, or you can feel different when you clean the house top to bottom, because keep busy is a step. But you don't feel better. You feel different. And that's why we believe that you need to lean into these feelings. And if you can actually embrace them, you know, if you feel sad, let that sadness come out, feel it, you know, rather than, because you do it with happiness. And all of them are normal and natural.
You laugh freely, don't you?
But of course you do. And that was something else you said a while back, was about the sneezing you wouldn't keep a crying. But how many times can you think, I know I can, of when I was a teacher, I remember many girls in particular, but sometimes the guys would come into the office because they'd suffered a loss. And that loss could have been a relationship breakup. I remember, parents had died or grandparents. Somebody had seen a terrible car crash in front of them. Somebody else, a friend had died in a car crash locally. I remember one lad coming, he was homeless. So all sorts of reasons they would come in. And what did I do? This is something else that's really huge. What did I do? I offered them a tissue. Now, I didn't think twice about it, because obviously through my life, people have done the same to me. When I cried, somebody had given me a tissue. And a lot of what we're talking about here with our remarks and our beliefs are actually learned beliefs from generation upon generation. So when I was doing my training and they said about this tissue scenario, and I thought, oh my God, I must have had at least 200 students come into that room struggling over sort of 10, 12 years. And nearly everyone I'd given them a tissue. And the thing about the tissue is, and we go back to this sorry thing. If you can imagine, I say this to my clients, it's quite difficult saying it to you virtually, but anyway, if you can imagine, okay, I'm going to imagine. So somebody's come into my office when I was a teacher and they're crying. And I can see they're distressed. And so I go to give them a tissue. Now, sometimes you do it, yes, because, your nose can run and maybe if you're a girl or a guy, your eye makeup's running. But actually, when we give them that tissue, 9 times out of 10, that person will stop or try to stop straight away. And they will often say, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, gosh, I'm okay, I'm sorry. Oh,
let me pull myself together.
You've got it. So what I do when people come to see me, I mean, obviously I do a lot online as well now, but the tissues are there, but I never offer them. And I say that to them. I actually say, there are tissues underneath you. Please don't feel pressurized to cry, and don't ever feel pressurized to stop crying. But the tissues are there. And then I explain what I explained to you.
And just naturally let it flow.
Yeah. Because if you offer the tissue to them, they straight away, I'm okay, and they start waving, and they start, they take a different breath, and they put it back in.
You look up, you literally try and put the emotion back in, swallow it.
And you do.
Yeah.
But does it come out again that day? Probably not. So we have to be so careful, particularly if when we express our emotions to somebody, that person, and this isn't an ideal world, I know, the person that we've just expressed our sadness or whatever the feeling is to, they need to be receptive and respectful of that. So they don't shut us down. So they don't minimalize. So they don't judge, criticize, or dismiss. Because if you have that judgment and that criticism, and you feel that your sentiment and the way that you are naturally feeling is embarrassing to the other person, you won't talk to them again. And you may not talk to anybody about the way you feel, because that feeling of being ignored, invisible, or being judged sticks.
Much shame for that emotion. And it's about doing, when we say like leaning into the emotion, that's a really good way that we can help others or ensure if people are being helpful to us. But it's also how we can help ourselves, isn't it? By allowing ourselves to just feel freely. Like it is literally as natural as the rain is. It's as natural as anything.
It is.
Is there anything else you want to add in terms of what it actually looks like to lean into the emotional? Do you think we've covered that enough in terms of actually just allowing yourself to feel it? And I think another one is anger is a really good one to talk about.
Oh yes. So I remember I never thought I had anger, and I was irritated with myself for that. And I don't know why, because I looked at a counselling course. I did a basic counselling course 15 years ago, and one of the tasks we had to do, it was an evening school, was to think of what made us angry. And these people around me were getting quite heated, and I was like, oh my God, I can't think of anything. I'm pathetic. I am so pathetic. What can't I think of? I'm
angry that I can't get angry.
I was frustrated and angry that I couldn't get angry. And then after a while, it took me a while, I realized that, bullying and bad manners and things like that, bullying in particular, really did make me angry. And I had ownership of that then. That felt good because I knew that made me really angry. And so anger's a strange one, because we often think in society that it's one of the ones that we shouldn't have. And it's an embarrassing one, or it's an out of control one. But actually anger is a normal reaction, as shame, as sadness, as betrayal, as jealousy. It's the same thing. All of those are valid. And so I know that when Alice has done her work, she said the same as me, that actually part of what we've realised, and she's realised it much younger than me, is that we don't own our anger. But we don't allow ourselves to feel it because we feel judged. We feel we won't be a good person, a nice person if we're angry. But actually, it's just part of who you are.
Again, it's a messenger, isn't it? It's a sign that your boundaries have been overstepped, or that something is gone too far. And I think it's quite interesting, the cultural differences between the sexes, because definitely for females, it's a lot less socially acceptable to express anger. And it's the same for guys. Guys don't cry. I cry all the time. Like, I don't know how they don't cry. But obviously their shame is different. For them, it's to not be seen as vulnerable or sad.
It is, and how interesting you just said that, because actually, out of control anger needs to be looked at so that you can channel it in certain ways, but you can still own it. You can still own it and feel it. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we go around punching people, but on my program, I often have clients, female or male, particularly female, that can feel angry, and this is a Dawn thing, not a grief recovery thing, but I often offer them a charity or secondhand china cup or plate, and I say to them, go outside and relive that moment, that feeling, and release that cup or that plate and smash it, and release the energy, and you get some incredible sounds that come out. and they feel so much better. And as I say, usually women, because it's not deemed as attractive, it's not deemed as female, and yet somehow we accept it in society for men. But how interesting, and I agree completely what you said about with women with crying. It is deemed more acceptable for a woman to cry, or a girl, than it is a boy or a man. But it shouldn't be.
No, we are human. Our sex does not make it any less likely to experience anger or any less likely to experience sadness, right? Because we're going to experience them all.
Absolutely.
I think that's really. I went to an energy healer in Bali, and she said to me, "You can't forgive until you've processed your anger." She's like, "You can't forgive that person until you allow the anger to pour out of you first." And she's like, whether that is go and scream or write a letter, all I love that, like smash something, obviously, like you say, not anybody or damage anyone's property, but to actually process it and to allow that emotion to come out, because motion is energy in motion, isn't it? There's a physical energy there that needs moving.
It does need moving. It needs shifting, and that leads me nicely on to, and I agree completely with what the energy healer said, and part of the grief recovery program is forgiveness. I mean, this is a huge topic in itself, but just to say, quite quickly, that forgiveness is actually a gift for ourselves. And before I did the program, I will be honest, I thought forgiveness was something that only the very good could do. Maybe those that have huge faith. I thought it was letting somebody off the hook. And then when I did the program and and we learn about forgiveness and that it's a gift for you, I realized that actually I had to feel or revisit these painful experiences that were trapped inside my body, my head and my heart and my soul. I had to revisit them. I needed to share with another person how those feelings and those experiences, those experiences and events made me feel. And then I was able to forgive. Now, a lot of people in society confuse forgiveness with condone. So forgiveness, one of the definitions they use, is to cease to feel the pain that's been caused by an offender. The other definition they use is forgiveness is to give up on the hope of a different or better yesterday. So it's gone, But knowing it's gone doesn't make it okay, doesn't instantly make you forget or let go. So forgiveness, when you revisit these things, you can say to yourself, do you know what? That person that's hurt me, that said those terrible things, I'm going to forgive because I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to carry that anymore because it's too painful. But you can't do forgive until you've shared with another those emotions, because they need to be aired.
So they
need to be heard. You have to.
Yeah.
You have to. Otherwise, forgiveness becomes something a bit like gratitude.
Just something we're pretending.
Yeah. And another thing about forgiveness as well is that it's an action first, and then you feel that you've forgiven.
Okay, interesting. So is the action letting go?
Yes.
The decision.
Yeah.
To let go?
Both. Yeah. I mean, and with the grief recovery, it's also interesting because I think particularly with what we call unresolved grief, which is probably a topic for another day, but with unresolved grief, any grief, but particularly unresolved grief, we realise that actually being able to apologise and then being able to forgive and share your emotions, we call them significant emotional statements, around that relationship is what enables you to let go. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people talk about moving on. Have you moved on yet? And all that. And a lot of people get really hurt by that. And I get it and I understand it. With the grief recovery, we're not, we know that you will never move on from the love, from missing somebody, from the sadness that they're no longer there. But you can move on from the painful memories that you've kept trapped inside you. And that's what the grief recovery does. It recovers you from those painful, trapped emotions. So sadness can still stay.
Okay. So what does that look like? That's actually was one of the questions I wrote down a bit earlier on. Is that can people move on from grief, from loss? I think I remember you sharing, and I think this was literally years ago now, on Facebook, about how grief goes from being this big black circle that's taken up your whole screen to maybe it's like a little bit of a black circle that kind of lives just inside you. So could you just explain the difference between what that is? I guess it's like the all-consuming grief to the manageable. So what's happened over the years is that people who look into the science behind it, if you like, they've realized that, I think, okay, let's go backwards. Many years ago, people assumed, so incorrectly, that you grieved for any loss for a short period of time. It was intense, there was mourning, and then, inverted commas, you moved on, you got over it. Nobody would have actually moved on or got over it, not after a short period of time, and not after expressing to people how they feel, and not being able to deliver any communication that they wish they had delivered to the person, because that's what stays trapped. I wish I hadn't said that before they died. I wish I had said I loved them. I wish I'd visited them in the hospital, and I didn't. I so regret that. I wish I had written the thank you letter to Granny before she died, or whatever. So these things that you wish you'd done or said, or the things you wish you hadn't said or done, they stay inside. They keep you trapped. They're part of what those sort of negative emotions that can take over, and then you become on this hamster wheel where you never get off, or a carousel. And so, yes, can you move on, as in move away from the painful undelivered communication? Yes. Do we move on from anybody, the divorce, or anybody, the bereavement of somebody that we loved dying? We don't ever stop loving them. We don't ever stop missing them. And we probably never stop feeling sad. But to go back to that page, the sadness becomes smaller over time. But they've realised now that instead of it being a small dot that stays a small dot, it actually goes big again when it's triggered by anniversaries, or the smell of their perfume, or somebody, you hear a song on the radio. Or I don't know, somebody orders their favourite cereal or something, and then, oh my God, it's all consuming again. Or you go stalking their Instagram page if it's a breakup, or it's different things. Absolutely. Or you see their name somewhere, or as I say, a common one is smells or songs. And so you can't control it. So yes, you would. It comes on the radio or something, and that emotion just comes up. Absolutely. But I suppose what I'm saying is,
That's normal and natural. Let it be. It's fine. Don't think I should have got over this. Don't feel that, it's been 5 years, it's been 20 years or whatever. Don't put a time on it. Don't put a time on it. But you can move on from those trapped emotions of, I wish I'd have told him this or her this. I wish I'd said this or hadn't said this. Those are the things that the grief recovery method can help you deliver by reflecting back on the relationship. And then you have this let go. So an apology, making an apology is massive. And that can be directly or indirectly. The forgiveness is always indirectly, because the other person you are forgiving, letting go of the hurt, they will see it as an attack. They will probably say, but I didn't say that. You're too sensitive. That's not the way I remember it. And if that happens, that pushes you back in again. That emotion goes back in and you think, oh God, perhaps I've gone wrong. Perhaps my memory is bad. But your emotions are your emotions, that they're real.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that can be done in isolation anyway, isn't it? You can forgive someone that's without involving them, because like you say, it's releasing yourself of that hurt, isn't it? So really, I know I've done it when I've kind of sat home with my journal and decided I'm letting that go.
Yes.
In terms of moving on, I think some other things that might be really helpful to touch on is, I'm sure, I'm not a specialist in this, so I don't know, but I'm imagining that, especially with bereavement, the kind of guilt can keep people stuck, the guilt of I shouldn't be happy or I shouldn't move on. And then the other thing, maybe like the fear of losing something again, or the fear of another betrayal, or the fear of whatever, keeping people stuck from going on to create a new life, I guess, a kind of new chapter, especially as if you have lost someone young, there's so many years left, isn't there, that you could find fulfillment even if you are still harboring that grief. So I guess moving on can look like that as well.
Oh, where do I start? Give me the first one first. There's so many that I could talk about.
I know, I just get so interested in this stuff. My brain works in multiple tabs.
It's lovely.
That I'm just like, I find it hard to rein it in. So let's go with guilt first, the guilt of moving on.
Okay. So when you do a program like the Grief Recovery Program, and we realize that all these emotions that we have are completely normal and natural, and it's being human, we can get rid of guilt by actually revisiting what it was that we felt guilty of, and if that meant that we need to apologize, which we can do directly or indirectly. Obviously, if it's a bereavement, you can't, but you can tell me, for argument's sake. So guilt is a weird one, because guilt is a feeling as well, and I have to be careful with guilt, because if somebody says to me they feel guilty, I cannot invalidate that feeling. However, I think a lot of the time people have regret, not necessarily guilt. And one of the things that I have been known to say, and I don't always say it now because I appreciate you have to validate that feeling, but if somebody had said to me, I feel guilty because if I'd have known she was going to die, I wouldn't have left the hospital, which has been said to me by a client. The guilt that they are carrying weighs so heavy on them that I turn it round and just suggest, but if you'd have known they would have died or they were going to die, would you have left? And of course, every time they say, no way. So I say, I cannot invalidate your feeling of guilt. I cannot and I will not. But it could be regret you're feeling, not guilt.
I know in quite abusive, toxic relationships, guilt can be an emotion that is manipulated onto another person when they don't actually, so guilt is a tricky emotion, isn't it? Because like you say, the emotion is real, but can you actually reframe it and look at it in a different way? Because perhaps they're not, guilt signifies you've done something wrong. It's a natural emotion for us to feel so that we, correct our behavior. But people can make us feel like we've done something wrong, and perhaps we haven't. So it's I guess look like you do, going back to that situation and looking at it, you can maybe look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and perspective.
You can, and I think it's the revisiting reflection that's important. And I think guilt is a bit like shame, and I think quite often shame and guilt are imposed on us by other people. And as you just said, particularly in an abusive or toxic relationship, that other person can make you feel guilty for not making a hot enough cup of tea, for not singing in the right key, for not looking the way that they want you to look. And, for whatever reason, they manipulate that situation in a really tragic way to make you feel guilty, and that weighs so heavy. But equally, shame is an interesting one, because I think that's imposed, and also it takes two people to create shame.
Okay.
Two people. So if I was to do something that I thought was a little bit tricky, or I wish I hadn't done it, I may not feel shame. But if I've expressed it to somebody, or someone's witnessed me doing it, they might say, that's such a shameful thing to do. God, I'd feel so ashamed if I was you.
And the judgments of
It's
others.
the judgment, yeah.
And often I think it's sometimes even the perceived judgment. So like, say someone's moving on for bereavement and getting into a new relationship, they're worrying about, it may feel good for them, but they feel that they should be mourning, or they feel like they should feel worse, or shouldn't be moving on so quickly.
I think
fearing other people's judgments, and maybe even other people's comments that are actually there in real life.
Okay, I need to grab that. Okay, so firstly, the lady that trained me, Carol, she tragically, her first husband died, and it was tragic, and she really struggled, and she'd read a lot of self-help books and nothing had worked. And then she found the Grief Recovery Handbook, which is the one that I'm showing you, even though it's visual, audio. People can't see it, but she found that, or somebody sent it to her, and it was the only time through her grieving process that she realized that this book resonated with her on a level that nothing else ever could or ever had. And she flew over to the States, which is where this originated from, two guys in the States sort of 35, 40 years ago. And it changed her life. And then she came back to the UK after that time, and then set up, she's the director of Grief UK now. And I know that she refers to her first husband and her second husband. And she still loves her first husband, even though he's dead. But she's very happily married to a second husband. And because she was able to do the program and say the things that she wished she'd said, and look back on the experiences that were still holding, trapped inside her. Because one of the things to talk about when there's a divorce or a death is you have your hopes, dreams, and expectations for the future. And their losses, you're robbed of those.
Yeah. And I read a really interesting thing about betrayal actually as well, is you're robbed of your history. So it was in the book called A State of Affairs, and it's saying in the book that, we all, there's so much uncertainty in life, but one thing we can guarantee is the past. But when you've had a betrayal, the past is now uncertain, because at times when you were on holiday, were they dating that person? At times when, and you start to fill in these gaps. I've lost my train of thought now, but where were we going with that? Loss of the future. So it could actually also be like loss of the past, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So those future plans, those dreams and desires you had with people, it's just,
I mean, it's huge. And I mean, I've had clients from, young 18 to 74 and anywhere in between. And the reasons they come to me are sometimes a bereavement, and sometimes it's divorce, sometimes there's been abuse, sometimes there's been sort of adoption there, and that's been, an issue on whatever level. There's been loss of voice, which I talk about a lot, which is when you're in a relationship and you feel you can't speak for yourself, you cannot be yourself in a controlling,
loss of
or
yourself.
A fearful environment. It's massive. Loss of identity, loss of trust, and all those losses are on top of loss of health, which could be physical or mental, loss of your home, loss of your job. There's so many. And moving, we haven't even touched on moving. Moving is a massive, particularly for children, because the loss of home, even if it's to a bigger place, or a better school, you still grieve what you had, the familiarity of that home and that neighborhood. And from a child's point of view, it can be really, really unsettling. And I think as the parent, because you're the responsible ones, in theory, and you're, for argument's sake, moving to a bigger house or a better area, you're feeling excited possibly and proud, but deep down you're probably going to be sad too, because is this the right thing? I'm going to miss that house. I'm going to miss all the memories I had in that house. I'm going to miss my neighbours. So we can have these emotions, excitement for the future, side by side with sadness too. And I think people think it's one or the other, but actually it can be both.
It's so true. I had a session once, and she was like, it's like a big soup of all the different emotions, and I was like, that's such a good way of describing it, because it is, isn't it? You can feel all these different things simultaneously, and I think it confuses us, because we're like, well, am I happy or am I sad? And it's like, it can actually be both.
And it can be both at the same time. And also, when we look at the relationship graph, which is something that comes on after the lost history, sort of session 6, 7, we actually take one relationship and we look at the good and the bad, the happy and the sad. But there could be an experience that could be both, happy and sad. So for argument's sake, you could, I don't know, you could go for a beautiful walk somewhere and you're really happy about it, and the sun was shining, and you thought, this is wonderful, you know, he doesn't take me anywhere, he's taking me for this beautiful walk or a lovely holiday. But then he starts picking on me or judging me or ignoring me. So it's underneath there's a sadness.
Sorry, carry on. Sorry, I cut in then. You can keep going.
Well, no, I was just saying that, you know, again, we can have these feelings, as you say, at the same time. And it isn't about, yes, that was a very sad experience. And sometimes it was very sad, but actually there was hope.
Or this good thing came out of it. I learned more about myself, or
absolutely.
And I think the key message amongst all of it is just don't judge what you're feeling, and just feel it. It's
let it be
natural as it was as when you were a kid and you just felt it and you expressed it.
Let it be.
Rather than being like, I shouldn't be, you know, just that lack of judgment. I just want to touch on going back to, you know, kind of when we forked out, there was also the fear when we have experienced a loss, us fearing it again. So that might be fearing getting into a new relationship, fearing that this partner might pass away, or fearing that I might get dumped again, or you know, or fear of injury again, whatever the thing might be, the fear that stops you from moving on. If you can delve into that a little bit.
Okay, so fear is a big one, and I think that the way that we tend to deal with that is that we would go back to the most painful of those fears. So, you know, maybe it was injury, maybe it was the relationship broke up and there was betrayal or loss of trust. And we would look into it with you, and then you would be able to share what happened, how you felt about it. And then this light bulb moment, if you like, comes on, and you realize that, again, it comes back to apology or forgiving, and or both. And if you apologize for something genuinely because you want to, never ever apologize if it's not genuine, because that's forced and that's not right. All this is about sincerity, and being authentic. So if you really feel you need to apologize to that relationship, for argument's sake, where there was betrayal, and maybe there's one apology, but there may be 6, 10, 20, whatever things you need to forgive because they really hurt, and they make you feel sad, as you say, or betrayed, or jealous, or anxious, whatever it is. If we then allow you, or I allow you, to deal with that and share those feelings, at the end of it, because you have been heard and you have shared these feelings and then let them go, you don't move forward with the same fear. You don't move forward with the fear, because the thing about grief is that it is it's the most powerful, if you like, negative emotion. Extremely. Grief is like nothing else, whatever we're grieving. Now, if you have a negative emotion or you have grief, it can be that it becomes, like I said at the beginning, many layers. Now, if we don't break that down and we get to the point where we're you know, treading water and we can't breathe, we will either implode or explode. And on top of that, you have that sense of fear. I can't love again because he may do the same or she may do the same. I don't want to marry again because look what happened last time. You know, or whatever the thing is.
Don't want to try another business because
exactly.
Yes.
And I've had that. And that can keep you stuck, and it can keep you in a place of fear. But once you've looked back at it, as I say, and you've realized what you felt at the time, lent into it, and then shared it and being heard. It is about being heard, because the thing is with journaling, I think it works on so many levels, but if you really want to go back and let go, it can be that it needs to be shared and heard. Okay, so when we do something we do on the grief recovery method as well is the completion letter that is the ultimate session, and that is this letter that is made up of different components. And guess what? It's apologies and it's forgivenesses, and it's also those significant emotional statements. And when you do that, and somebody hears you relate and reflect upon those things that you felt but you never told anybody, or you never told that person, most people, when they finish that letter, you see that their shoulders go down, their breathing changes. Sometimes there's a few tears, sometimes there's sobbing, sometimes there's just quiet, and it is incredible. Well, it's a relief because of the release.
Yeah.
And you go, I want to say go forward, but you do have this incredible emotional awareness that you never had before, which, to sum it up, is about, my God, I've had so many losses, and I never realized that bullying had affected me so much, or that my parents' divorce affected me so much, or that toxic relationship that I had when I was 16 affected me so much. And when you go back, you can see this pattern of behavior that's happened. You can see and understand and never judge. I made that decision, and now I want to apologize to that person, or now I need to let go, so I'm going to forgive.
And it enables you to understand yourself in this moment, doesn't it? So I'm supporting a client at the moment who's got very similar, had gone through a very similar health issue to coronavirus. So anxiety is really high because there's been a traumatic incident there that hasn't been dealt with. And the big thing is the relief to understand where the anxiety is coming from, and to understand yourself in a better way. Just before we kind of close, because I know we could talk about this all day because we love it. You said implode and explode, and I just wanted you to delve into that a little bit, because I know we spoke about the body keeps the score, and I don't think we've quite covered how it can keep the score, and I think that kind of explanation there might help us to understand that.
Right. So when we let me go back to the STIRBs initially, if you like, because I think this explains it. So most people, not all, but most people do turn to food. Food is the most common, along with alcohol and drugs. There's escapism, which is your, watching movies all the time. Game, I always do this, game box, I don't know why. I always do that, games. There's hoarding, which is a massive step. There's exercise, which is good in itself, but if you're doing it to distract yourself from the pain, then you're not doing it for the reason of what you think, which is keeping healthy. It's actually, I've got to go to the gym, I've got to go for another run, because I don't want to think about this pain, I don't want to feel it, so let me keep busy is another one. So with the STIRBs, they're what we turn to, and if they're short term, it's okay, because we need to have something when our world has all gone upside down and we're struggling. Long term, those things, particularly anything that could lead to an addiction, and particularly anything that could lead to an eating disorder around food, needs to look deeper. Why am I doing this? It's been 2 years and I'm still drinking too much. I'm still doing too much drugs. I'm still got a hate love relationship with food. So, you're comfort eating, or you're going towards bulimia or anorexia. So those STIRBs are there for a reason. We need distraction, but we don't need them long term, because long term they can do a lot of damage, because they're putting a plaster on this, this wound underneath. Now, when it comes to implode and explode, I realized when I did the program, I don't STIRB. I naturally don't STIRB. So I do like a glass of wine, but I wouldn't have a bottle. Now, I am not judging anyone that drinks a lot at all, because actually I know that if I was somebody that has STIRBed more, I wouldn't have all the illnesses I've got. Because it imploded with me, and I kept it in for so many years. There have been so many experiences in my life that other people may not think are traumatic. Let's remember that. But I realised now were, to me, and they really hurt, or they frightened me, or whatever. Now, because the body keeps a score, as we said, I got to the point when I was in my 30s that I felt really poorly, and then I got this autoimmune condition, and then another traumatic event happened 5-6 years later. What happened? I got another autoimmune condition. Something happened 10 years after that. I got another one. So with me, not being able to voice, because I was a very quite shy girl up to a certain point, maybe up to about the age of 10 or something. But because that was the way I was, and I saw myself, I kept it all in. And I continued that behavior. I'm not confrontational, but I now know that that's actually a disadvantage for anyone, but particularly for me. I needed to speak my mind. I needed to say, I don't like that. You shouldn't have done that. That's hurt me. But I didn't. And so I imploded because I didn't stir. So other people may find that they've got so much anger, if you like, or jealousy inside them, that they explode. They explode. And I think I saw a quote a long time ago, I think it might have been on Instagram, that said that grief is anger turned inside, anger is grief turned inside out. And I think for some people it is. They're grieving something. There may not be a death, there may not be a bereavement, a close bereavement, but they are still grieving a loss. And because we're not taught in our society to deal with loss, we're just not taught. We're taught how to achieve, how to, gain and pass and succeed. But we're not told how to deal with failures or disappointments or mistakes. And we need those things.
We're taught that we shouldn't have them, which is like a natural part of life, isn't it? I know that's been a huge lesson for me. It's not linear. Expect failure.
Absolutely. And if you don't go for something and take risks, whether and if you do fail, you learn from it. And you learn from mistakes. You don't learn from getting it right. And I think there's just far too much emphasis, and it needs to be addressed, when we're children. So schools need to be aware of it, and we can't push it just onto the teachers. It needs to be parents as well, and grandparents. But this is a mammoth task, but it needs to start now. We need to be addressing these things, that failure is okay, and that your emotions, if they're deemed negative, which I don't like that term, but most people see emotions as positive or negative. That they are authentic, they need to be felt and leaned into. I think there's so much that needs to be said and done, but the biggest thing is there's more than just a bereavement for loss. So many more.
Yeah, so I think the key takeaway messages really are that we've probably all experienced loss. So they vary. It depends on the individual. What's a loss for one is different for other. What's pain for one. To allow ourselves to feel our feelings. Otherwise, we will literally implode or explode. It is that. And also maybe the way, just being a bit more careful in the way that we deal with other people's emotions.
Yes, I agree. And one thing I'd just like to say as well, excuse me, that loss can be thought of or regarded as anything that is no longer. But we need to be aware that loss is also things that never actually happened. So for some people, the loss of never finding a soulmate, loss of never having children, loss of never having the career they dreamt of, loss of not getting those qualifications that meant they didn't take the path they wanted, loss of maybe not being able to drive, which would have given them the independence, because for whatever reason they can't. There's so many other losses that aren't necessarily what you had and is gone. It's what never was. Yeah,
that people are feeling and they're carrying, and it's either coming out in their health or it's coming out in how they feel daily. In their behavior.
And the thing about grief is that and because the loss has affected you in one way or the other, you actually carry it with you. You carry it in the way that you walk, in the way that you speak, in the way that you interact. It's there. And so a program like the Grief Recovery Method can help you release all those things. As I say, it doesn't take away the sadness, but it can take away any of those trapped emotions that are still within you. Because some people, I don't want to go on too long here, but some people, they relay a tale of woe, if you like, of sadness, month after month, year after year. you know, he did this and he was a bad father or whatever, you know, and he wasn't there for you, and it was me that took you to all the school things, and you think, and their friends and parents can think, oh my God, she's still stuck. And for the people who are stuck with those kind of what they wish had been different, better, or more, a program like ours enables you to release that, to reflect on it and to share it, so you can step off that trapped sensation of going over and over and over.
And I think everyone would benefit from that, because we're kind of probably all stuck in some areas of our lives. Whether it's saying recognize disturbed behavior, where does that come from? Oh, I love that. It's been so amazing speaking to you. Would you mind just sharing where everyone can find you? I'll also tag it as well. But
yes, of course. So my website is www.dawnford.co.uk. I'm on Facebook, Dawnford Loss and Wellbeing, and I'm also on Instagram as Grief Hereford.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. Honestly, it's been amazing.
I knew it would be lovely.
There.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed and got a lot out of this episode. If you like this episode and you think somebody you know would benefit from hearing it, please either share with them directly or share it on your Instagram story. Don't forget to tag myriad_. If you'd like to get the nudge on future episodes, please subscribe.